Welcome to the deep dive. You're here for the critical insights driving the global conversation, and today that means we are going deep into China under Xi Jinping.
Hmm.
Specifically, we're looking at the really fundamental shifts, the big ones, that have picked up speed since the 18th Party Congress back in 2012.
And that event, the 18th Party Congress, it's absolutely key. Our sources for this deep dive today, they're a fantastic collection of analyses, mostly from Indian strategic thinkers, experts.
Right.
And they really treat these party congresses as, well, the bedrock of how the PRC plans things politically. It gives us a great lens to view China's path.
So the mission for you listening in is pretty straightforward. We want to understand why China shifted so dramatically. How did they move from Deng Xiaoping's famous advice, hide your strength, bide your time,
Yeah, that whole approach.
to this really assertive, almost aggressive global posture we see now? We're aiming to connect the internal engines, politics, security, with the external push in foreign policy and economics.
And if you kind of boil down what these contributors are saying, the consensus is, well, it's hard to miss. China's increasingly assertive policies under Xi, they are the main driver of strategic realignment, regionally and globally.
Okay.
The core idea is simple. China feels it's done being a rule taker. It wants to be a rule maker now, a powerful one.
Right. So let's start with that internal engine then, because like you said, understanding the domestic gears really helps explain what's happening outside. The sources hammer home this huge change in the CPC, the Communist Party's leadership structure. What's the key political shift here? What does it mean for governance?
It's a massive reversal, really.
Yeah.
The defining change is the end of collective leadership.
Yeah.
That was the model. Leaders after Mao, like Hu Jintao, Jiang Zemin,
They set that up.
yeah, to stop any one person getting too much power, like Mao did. Xi Jinping has basically dismantled that whole tradition.
Completely.
And he did that by gathering up political titles we haven't really seen used like this in decades. Precisely. He's consolidated power to an extraordinary degree, built up a personality cult, really, that puts him nearer to Mao and Deng in stature. He got the title Hexen Corps leader.
War leader.
And Ling Xiu, which is more like spiritual leader. This isn't just symbolic stuff. It signals he's the essential guy for the whole country, not just, the party boss. This centralization, that's the engine.
And maybe the most obvious tool for enforcing this consolidation, at least from the outside, has been the anti-corruption drive. Sounds good, right? Clean up politics. But our sources say it's much more than that. It's a purge mechanism.
That's the key insight, absolutely. I mean, yes, it tackles some corruption, sure, but it's a deeper political job. Purging rivals, potential challengers, making sure everyone is loyal. The numbers are just, well, huge. Between late 2012 and 2021, nearly 946,000 party members were disciplined.
Wow, nearly 1 million people in under 10 years. It's hard to even imagine the internal effect of that.
Totally. And the purge deliberately hit rivals, potential checks on power, over 55 generals, for instance.
55 generals.
Yeah. So Xi effectively dismantled the whole system of potential successors, ensuring loyalty flowed straight up to him, removed those institutional brakes on his power.
Okay, so beyond the purges, you need an ideology, a roadmap. The sources talk about the four comprehensives announced in 2014. What's this theoretical blueprint about?
It basically lays out his four big goals: building a well-off society, deepening reforms, implementing the rule of law, and strengthening party discipline. But the crucial bit, the real nuance, is that rule of law.
Okay.
While it sounds like everyone's equal before the law, the way it's framed makes it crystal clear. The Communist Party itself, it remains above the law. It sets the legal rules, but isn't really bound by them.
That's quite the institutional setup. And we see this centralization playing out very clearly in places like the Tibet Autonomous Region, right?
Yeah.
How has policy hardened there?
Oh, definitely. The policy now is laser-focused. It's about eliminating the Dalai Lama's influence, pushing ethnic unity, and just enforcing really tight security. The loyalty demands are everywhere. Monasteries, for example.
Yeah.
They have to display photos of the three big leaders, including Xi Jinping. It's a very direct way of demanding political conformity, even in spiritual places.
And this control isn't just about monasteries. It goes right up to the physical border.
It does. You see this strategic building of well-off villages, Shokang villages they call them, across 21 border counties.
Right near the border with India.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It involves deliberately moving people. Like in Nagaras County, they relocated over 6,000 people closer to the border. They're not just building houses. It's like planting loyal populations on the frontier. The stated goal is Improving lives, yes, but also explicitly strengthening border security and long-term stability in these really sensitive zones.
Okay, so this internal tightening, this power consolidation, it clearly feeds a much more assertive external posture. Now, this is where it gets really interesting for a lot of observers. The sources detail this massive overhaul of China's military, the PLA. What were the main goals of those huge reforms in 2015, 2016?
The core aim was transformation, to turn the PLA into a modern force, capable of joint operations, different branches working together seamlessly and crucially, projecting power well beyond China's own borders. The structural change was probably the biggest signal of that external ambition.
Getting rid of the old structure, you mean?
Exactly. They took the 7 old military regions, which were more sort of administrative, and turned them into 5 joint theater commands. Think of them like regional warfighting HQs,
Okay.
designed to coordinate everything, Army, Navy, Air Force, instantly. The goal is specifically to shorten the ODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's military jargon, but basically means cutting reaction time way down, making the force faster, more agile.
And they also formally brought in new areas of warfare, cyber, space. That became official.
Correct. They set up the PLA Strategic Support Force, the PLA-SSF. That centralizes space, cyber, electronic warfare, psychological operations, all that stuff.
So info warfare, basically.
Yeah, it's an admission that future fights happen online as much as offline. Separately, they also elevated the PLA Rocket Force, the PLA ROF, the guys with the missiles, conventional and nuclear, to a full-service branch equal to the others.
And controlling the PLARF centrally from the top military commission, that's strategically crucial, isn't it?
It is. It gives them huge strategic deterrence, plus high-altitude operational reach. And critically, it helps offset the disadvantage the PLA Air Force has always had operating off the super-high Tibetan Plateau. Gives them strike options without just relying on planes.
So how does this beefed up military muscle translate into China's diplomacy? Everyone talks about wolf warrior diplomacy. Is that basically it?
That aggressive tone. It's a direct result of this newfound military confidence, yeah. China's foreign policy now is defined by a really firm refusal to compromise on what it calls its core interests. Doesn't matter what the international pressure is. Diplomacy often looks more like confrontation.
But didn't Xi talk about accommodating major concerns back in 2018 at that SCO summit?
He did. And that's the contrast that really defines this era. That rhetoric of accommodation. It's basically vanished from their actions since then.
Like where?
Well, look at their flat refusal to accept confidence-building measures in the South China Sea. Or on the Indian border, the Ladakh confrontation in 2020 is the prime example. They're pushing this idea of a moral realist framework as an alternative to the Western liberal order. But let's be frank.
Yeah.
The realist part, power interests, dominance, seems way more prominent than the moral part right now.
And this assertiveness, according to your sources, it's even aimed at telling smaller neighbors what they can and can't do.
Pretty explicitly, yes.
Yeah.
They use official documents like a 2017 white paper stated, and I'm quoting loosely here, small and medium-sized countries need not and should not take sides among big countries.
Wow, that's blunt.
It's a very clear message. Line up with us. Forget about strategic independence.
Okay, let's pivot now to the economic side of things. How does this assertive political and military stance connect to the global economy? Xi's big signature project is the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. What's the latest on that huge plan?
Well, China frames the BRI as, like, the start of globalization 3.0, a Chinese-style globalization, all based on land and sea connections. The ambition they state is huge, linking up policies, infrastructure, trade, money, people across continents.
But the reality on the ground seems a bit more complicated, lots of controversy.
Absolutely. The big paradox is, despite the global rhetoric, the BRI is still mostly just a collection of bilateral deals. Country A makes a deal with China, country B makes a separate deal. And these deals are constantly slammed for not being transparent.
The costs, the terms.
Exactly. Costs, interest rates, governance. It's often murky, and that lack of clarity can lead to serious debt problems for the receiving countries.
Which leads to that whole debt trap diplomacy accusation we hear so much about.
Precisely. You look at Sri Lanka, or how Nepal had to renegotiate loans. When countries can't see the real long-term cost, they can easily get into unsustainable debt. That fuels the whole debate. Is it development aid, or is it strategic leverage disguised as aid? Plus, the initiative has definitely hit some headwinds. Investment slowed down quite a bit after COVID-19. CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, saw investment drop like 56% in one period.
Okay, so beyond the big infrastructure projects, China's sheer manufacturing power, especially in key supply chains, that gives it enormous leverage, doesn't it? Geoeconomic power.
This is maybe their biggest strategic card. Take rare earth elements, REs. China holds something like 37% of the world's reserve.
And those are critical for, well, everything modern.
Pretty much. Advanced industries, defense tech like guided missiles, electric cars, smartphones, you name it. If China ever decided to seriously restrict exports, entire global industries could just grind to a halt.
Which connects to their push for tech self-sufficiency, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the U.S. trade tensions.
That's the driving force behind the Made in China 2025 plan, MIC 2025. The goal is incredibly high self-sufficiency rates, like 80% for things like EV batteries, core medical components. The explicit aim is to insulate China from Western, particularly U.S., pressure on supply chains and technology access.
And this over-reliance is exactly why we're seeing other countries trying to diversify away from China now.
Yeah, the pandemic really highlighted the risks, didn't it? Lockdowns in China caused global shortages. Then the Russia-Ukraine conflict hit supplies of things like neon gas, palladium. So you see efforts like the Quad focusing on supply chain security, or the SCRI, the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative between Japan, India, and Australia. These are direct responses, trying to build alternatives and reduce that vulnerability.
And finally, the elephant in the room is semiconductors. That remains the ultimate choke point.
Absolutely. Taiwan's dominance in high-end chip manufacturing, they call it the silicon shield theory.
Silicon shield.
Yeah, the idea is that the world relies so heavily on Taiwan for advanced chips that any conflict there would instantly crater the global economy. This dependence gives Taiwan a kind of deterrent, forcing other powers to care about its security just to keep their own economies running.
That was a fantastic deep dive. We've covered a lot the shift from ideological tightening at home, driven by that anti-corruption campaign,
Right.
to a much more muscular, militarized assertiveness nearby, and then this aggressive economic strategy globally with BRI and supply chain dominance.
But there's one last piece of the sources highlight that's really fascinating, maybe a bit surprising. It's the weaponization of the media under Xi.
Weaponization, how does that work?
It's kind of a two-pronged attack. Domestically, it means demanding total, unquestioning loyalty from all media. China ranks like 177th out of 180 countries on media freedom indices, just total control.
Okay, internally. What about externally?
Externally, they're pouring massive resources into what they call positive propaganda, using state outlets like the Voice of China, buying stakes in foreign media companies. The stated goal is to tell China's stories well, gain international respect, essentially trying to manufacture soft power on a global scale.
It's this huge state effort to craft an image. But the irony is pretty stark, isn't it? The sources really make you think about this. China's spending billions trying to boost its soft power, convince the world of its benign intentions. Yet at the very same time, it's imposing the absolute tightest censorship imaginable at home, punishing journalists, using things like that Xi's Study Strong Nation app, which sounds like Orwellian networked authoritarianism, to enforce rigid ideology on its own citizens.
So, can a soft power campaign actually work? Can it be effective if everyone sees the content as, well, completely controlled by the government, lacking any real freedom or authenticity? Or is this massive global push ultimately self-defeating because the iron fist at home just destroys any credibility abroad? That's the question the sources leave you with, and definitely something for you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.